Hello, everyone. My name's Aaron Keller. I am the owner and CEO of Voice America Media, and I am joined by my colleagues today to go over our second part of our four-part webinar series, showing you the essentials of creating, identifying, and qualifying your podcast for your listening audience. I'm joined today by longtime 24-year veteran host Patricia Raskin, host of the Patricia Raskin Show on the Voice America Media Network. Harrison Ide, our marketing coordinator, marketing manager, and Sandra Rogers, our senior executive producer. I'm going to toss the baton over to Patricia, who's going to get us started. Patricia.
Okay, thank you so much, Aaron. Nice to be here, everyone. So the first thing we look at is what makes you stand out? What makes you different? How is your energy and your style and approach different from what you hear? And we'll talk about this later, but listening to podcasts and listening to the differences can really help you. But people will tell you what your style is like. People will say, gee, you do this in a certain way or that in a certain way. Pay attention to what you hear and also think about what is your own energy level and your own approach that does make you different. Sandra.
Yeah, I think speaking to the community that you want to relate to your brand, your product is equally important, Patricia, because people are listening to shows these days to learn something from someone. So if you're that expert, then and definitely speak to the community based on your expertise.
Okay. All right. Something I just said, listen to other podcasts. That will really help you. It will help you pick out almost immediately, how am I different? How is this approach something that I like or I don't like? It helps you really see where you are. And remember, everybody has a unique style. And often people will listen to a podcast because they not only like the content, but they like you. And many times, even if they like the content, but they don't like your style, they may not listen. So it's important to get that comparison by listening to podcasts. Sandra.
Yeah, listen as a listener, see how the delivery is being made by that host, and learn from the tone, the content, etc., that they are bringing forward. I love podcasts that have or hosts that have a personality and they show that personality. It's easier to consume that information if this person isn't really like rigid and lacking a personality, if you will. So I would say listen and learn and then adapt some of that style and tone for your podcast.
Build and grow your audience. Well, part of that is knowing what your message is, understanding why you chose the topic, but will that topic hold the attention of your listeners? What is current? What does your audience need to hear, particularly in your subject matter? So your message may change one week from another unexpectedly because there's a need that your audience has. And there's something that just happened in the world or in your area that speaks to that. So you certainly want to keep your message current and you want to be able to hold the attention of the audience. What is it they need? What is it they're hearing? Sandra.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly correct, Patricia. Define your ideal listener. Know who that listener is. And then create some relevant, timely episode that does bring in some of the things that are going on currently in the news, around town, etc. Add that to part of your show. And it's also important to promote every episode. It's equally important to encourage your listeners to share what they've heard as well. So we know that it's not a one and done thing. It's a continual effort to build this program, build their show. And some of these practices and procedures are things that will have to continuously be made in order to achieve what you want. And obviously that's a larger audience for your show.
Yeah. something we said before, relating your content to now. That is very compelling because, we're all listening to the news, we're all hearing things, and that can be top of mind. So how is what you're talking about relating to a change that might just have happened or something that can be integrated into what's happening now, whether it's a current event or whether it's a situation or whether it's a health topic? Again, you want to relate it to what people are looking at right now. Sandra.
Yeah, that's right. What's current? What's trending out there? Um, Address what the audience cares about now. If it's healthcare, talk about that in your show, on your show, in that episode. When it comes to what are we feeling pain about now? Gas prices and groceries, all the things are on people's mind, politics and that sort of thing, and not to get too detailed and not intricately into it, but bring it to something that's current, something that's relatable. And I found that when that happens, if you need to replay that show for some reason, you can also play something that you talked about before as a replay, and it still is relatable to that audience.
Yeah, right. Aaron, anything to add to that?
Yeah, actually, I would say make sure you stick with what's relevant to your audience. Don't try to cover everything to appease everyone, to appeal to everyone. I'm a big gamer, and I live and sleep and breathe the industry. I don't just play the games, but I learn what's going on in the industry. And one of the heads of one of the biggest studios that makes games said, "A game for everyone is a game for no one." And that resonates in the podcast world as well, because if you're trying to appeal to everyone, you're not really focusing on the people that are actually interested in your show, and you're going to lose the true audience.
Great,
Mhm.
thank you. Yeah. So the intro to your podcast, first of all, writing it, and then definitely delivering it. And so, how do you write it? You want to think about, again, what does the audience need? What is the message that you have? And what's the hook? Many times, you even see this at the end of broadcasts, where a broadcaster will say, "Now, coming up next," even though it may not come up next.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like an intro to the next section. So, what creative ideas do you have that will hold the audience attention? And really, that opening story you want to make compelling, so they're saying, "Oh, I want to hear what that is." Sandra?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And I know I've watched the news till the end when they've told me that that story is coming up next, and it doesn't come up next to the end of the newscast. But that is exactly right. It's a way to keep your audience engaged, if you will. So hook the audience for 30 seconds. And then, you have them waiting to hear what you want to convey. State why the episode matters or would matter to them. That also gives them an incentive to stay around because they're interested now in what that is. And so you set those expectations and you have them, and not to be fake or phony or anything like that, Patricia, but it is a way to create that engagement, create that interest, and then continue to have them stay until the end of the show.
Aaron, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's just important to understand, what people's attention spans are nowadays. They're very short. Everyone's very busy. As long as you have that hook that really makes their ears perk up, you're going to be able to just kind of like life hack their attention span. Know what the audience is. It's all about knowing the audience. What are they going to want to stay for? That's what you got to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Harrison, anything to add to this, particularly where you're in marketing and you do a lot of production and you're putting these pieces together?
Yeah, so your intro is going to be your thesis for your essay, so to speak. So making sure you're adding your hooks, making sure you're relaying it to what you're talking about in your topics, and then also creating some type of marketing buzz is always a good thing to look into with your intro. Answering questions, showing questions, and relating it to your audience as best you can.
Right. Okay. So building and growing your audience. Now, in another podcast that we're going to do, we'll talk about marketing, but here we're talking about growing your audience from within in terms of people wanting to tune in and listen to your show. And that can be your story, your sequence, your style. People remember the story, and we'll talk about story in a little bit as well. But they remember the story more often than they'll remember the facts. And then if that story is related to the facts, that's what they will get. And again, how are you delivering that? What's your style? Are you speaking slowly, too quickly? Are you speaking in a very impassioned way? So that makes a difference. The combination of your passion, of your delivery style, and the content, and also the way you're sequencing. Sandra.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a story is compelling. If it's a personal story, your personal experience, and you speak that full-throatedly to your audience, it creates that engagement. It creates that relatability. I have worked with so many professionals that did exactly that and had the purpose of why they wanted to do their show, because they wanted the mothers to know about this, or they wanted the families to know that this, this is what can help them. It really was a compelling show. It really was a show that engaged the audience and followed that host through the series. And then, went on to a social media platform with that host, etc. So that's truly important in terms of building and growing your brand, your audience. Yeah.
Yeah. Aaron.
No, I think Sandra, you touched on that perfectly. You really just to reiterate what you said, I think that's you made good points there.
Harry, anything to add about engaging the audience?
Yeah, just using your resources is a really important tool. Listening to comments, listening to concerns, looking through social media on what your audience is engaging in, and crafting your podcast or your intros and making sure that you're relating to the audience that you're keeping, and then bringing a new audience that you want to bring in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. All right. Okay, so talking about our tone. Tone is really important, particularly when you have a podcast that doesn't have video and they're not seeing the body language. That tone is everything because that's what they have. So the word and the tone combined make the difference. And your tone, again, pitch is important, volume's important, passion's important, energy's important. And people can pick that up. I mean, they can pick up your passion. And then in terms of choosing the right words, think about that. Think about words that might be inflammatory or turn off some people, or words that maybe just may not work for a certain segment. So always think in your mind about the lowest common denominator, meaning the person who may listen for the first time. What might turn them on? What might turn them off? You're not going to hit this 100%. But again, you want to be yourself, but you also want to use words that you feel will be compelling and not off-putting. Sandra.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think when I listen to commercials on television and it's one of those commercials that tell you that you have some uh, illness that you should ask your doctor about, they always say these big things that I have no idea what they mean. And it's like, well, I didn't even know that existed. How can I know that I have something like that? So I think you're right. The tone should not be monotone. You should not sound like you're reading. Energy is super important because the audience are going to walk away if they don't feel like there is that right energy for them. We had hosts that would do meditation on their in their episode. And they would walk people through that, and they'd say, "Hey, look, if you're driving, don't listen to this part of the segment. Wait for you to get home, and then so that you can relax." So it was important to tell them that I'm going to help you relax for a minute and give you something to meditate and show you how to meditate. And that was perfect. But choosing the tone, either you're going to lose that audience or you're going to encourage them, compel them to stay with you. That definitely has a lot to do with tone and the script and choosing the right word in your show.
Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. Sandra's spot on about the energy. You know, maintaining high energy when you're talking, basically, because you can't see them, or people can't see you rather. I remember when I was younger and I worked, you know, first time retail, I had to make announcements over the grocery store phone. Hey, customers, we're
Yeah.
closing in a few minutes, and I was told, hey, people can hear a smile. You know, smile when you do it. Have good energy when you're doing this, because people can hear your energy over the phone. And that goes for podcasting as well, of course. They can hear your authenticity, they can hear your energy, and they can hear your smile, they can hear your personality. So, you know, bring your best foot forward when you're in front of that mic and act like you're on video.
Right. Harrison.
Yes, yeah. So, if everyone's been watching the news lately, they use, the breaking news kind of segments all the time, and they're announcing it. And for the most part, maybe there might be some breaking news happening, but really they're trying to set the tone for what is following and what they're talking about. And it's the same thing in podcasts. Maybe not using the terms breaking news, but kind of setting that tone with something that is going to carry through your podcast, and keep that relevancy, keep those audience engaged, and just finish out the podcast with that.
Great. All right. The compelling questions, the questions that are thought provoking, that are engaging, the aha moment. So when you are interviewing and you have the questions in front of you, don't just use those questions by rote. If you do that, anybody can do that. You can just keep asking the questions. You want to ask a question, really listen to what that person's saying, and then it may be very nuanced, meaning that there's something in what they said that you want to ask another question. Like, gee, explain that further. Or, gee, that's really interesting. Would that work in this situation? So you're using the questions as a springboard. But what you want to do is really listen for what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and also in your back of your mind, how is the audience? How is this sitting with the audience? Do I have naysayers? Do I have people who are really interested in this? So ask those questions that you think the person listening would want to know. Sandra.
Yeah, I agree with that. I personally ask a lot of questions, and I get ragged for it sometimes. But I think it's a way to really get a level of understanding of what's happening and um, allow that aha moment to happen for your listeners. um, Things like, hey, what keeps you up at night? That can be a question that could lead to so many other examples of what's keeping that person up at night, sort of thing. So I think the um, not just those standard questions that are often asked of a guest or an audience, but go deeper, probe a little more, and then that also gets that moment of clarity for people and compels them to come back for the next episode.
Yeah. Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely well said on that, Sandra. And this is all psychology based too. I mean, this applies over like every facet of life, human interaction. If you are going to sit there and just make a statement, you know, the conversation's going to die off, and it's going to, you're going to lose listeners. If you ask the questions and you get people to start thinking, they're going to want to learn more. They're going to want to continue to listen. It's going to be more dynamic. It's going to flow a lot better than just saying, you know, something that's not compelling, something that's not engaging, that doesn't make them think. So really, psychologically, we're curious people. We're a curious creature, us human beings. If you ask those questions, it gets us thinking, it gets our brains firing up, and it really keeps us engaged.
Harrison.
Yeah. So, if you're watching like 60 Minutes or you're watching your favorite podcast, the difference in conversation is going to be apparent. You're not going to hear someone asking on 60 Minutes what their guest's favorite color is or something like that. It's just not engaging. It doesn't really show anything about that guest. And that's kind of the purpose of the podcast, is to show that guest, show their business, show what they do, and, kind of show the interesting parts of that. And so that's what you always want to look forward to doing, is bringing out the best of your guest, and that's going to be through questions.
All right. So each segment does grow your audience. So what does that mean? You're building your podcast in a sequence so that you're going to hold the attention of your listeners. Now, sometimes you may be out of sequence, meaning that you do a podcast, it's very compelling, and you said to the listeners, and our next show, right? But on the next show, something may have happened in the news or something that's compelling. So it can still be part of the sequence by saying to your guests, we talked about this last time, and I said we talk about this the next time. But here's something that I think has come up in the news or come up in our area, and I really want to give this attention. And then you're not so much out of sequence because you're letting them know, and you can weave the other part of that, what you talked about last time, or whatever you wanted to do to build, you can weave that into something new. So I guess what I'm saying is don't be firm and rigid about the sequence because there may be times that you have to move in and out and flow.
Yeah.
Sandra.
Yeah. And is this a segment inside of the hour for the show, or is it the next episode? Because
Well,
that's also of interest. When you have a break in your show, how do you come back from that break? You know what I mean? And so, um, if a series is a series, just to get back to the point here, when you do the first episode and you come back for the second episode, it's almost like a book. And every book has a chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, sort of thing. So the overall title of the book is the title. And then the chapters tell the story. It builds the audience. It gives that information.
right. Aaron.
Yeah, and I think, it's very important that you are open to the dynamic nature of a conversation.
Mhm.
You don't want to just check off all the boxes on all your questions. If you have to do a part two, that's wonderful. If you only got
Yeah.
to 6 out of your 20 questions, that's wonderful. It's really about becoming engaging, it being dynamic, and it just flowing naturally. It's a conversation with a mic in front of you. That's what it is.
That's a great point. Harrison.
Yeah, so your questions are always going to lead to more questions. And like Aaron's saying, if you're asking the right questions, you'll never have a shortage of questions to ask, and to keep that conversation going. And one of the things you want to do when looking at times and segments and things like that and sequences is making sure you're never, stopping the flow of conversation. So like you said, Patricia, being very dynamic, kind of just having that conversation going with the flow, making sure that you'll probably always have your eye on the clock, but you want to make sure that you're getting everything out of your guest.
Timing. Storytelling is so important. But again, if the story is, again, too long, you may lose your listener. And if it's too short, the listener might go, well, what happened? I didn't hear the rest of that. So how do you work that in where you tell the story, but you tell it in a way that's compelling, but you want to almost condense it so that you have the story, you have the buildup, you have the point. And then after the point of the story, you explain what it did or how, why this is important. Why did you tell this? You tell a story and you say, now, here's how I think that story relates. But you want to keep it, people's attention spans, particularly today, are shorter than they were before. We have texting, we have social media. People look quickly. They don't want to read a lot. So the same thing with listening. We want to hear this, we want to get to the point. We want to build that crescendo, and then we want to release it or leave the story at that point where we think we've gotten our point across. Sandra.
Yeah, I got to go back to what Aaron said earlier about, if you don't get it all in this episode, you can certainly come back to it or take it beyond the podcast and go do something on YouTube or go somewhere else to create more of an explanation around that. But you want to let that breathe, that story. You want it to be a moment where that listener can hear it and go back in their lives and relate it to something that they've experienced. as well. So not too short, not too long is exactly the message there. It can be just right, and if it doesn't end, if it needs more time, then you can come back to it. I think, and that also brings that audience back to learn the rest of it.
Aaron.
Yeah, I would say, it's important to kind of have a mental outline of how you want to go about doing your show, doing your episode. Where are your what I like to call outs? When it's time to move to the next topic in the segment, certain things that all mush together that you want to get in the first segment rather than just getting from one topic to the next each segment, just kind of keep it dynamic, like I said before. And don't script everything out, keep it flowing. Part two, perfectly fine, like I said, but it's really just about understanding where you're going to go from each topic and from each segment and knowing when, how much time you have to work with. And some of that too is also meeting with your guest beforehand. We like to say there's a 15-minute buffer before the show starts to meet with your guest, go over what everything's going to be talking about if you have a guest, that is, and just ensuring that they're on the same page, knowing that it's conversational, but these are the points that we want to touch on and being open to, moving away from that.
Harrison.
Yeah. So, what, kind of reiterating what Aaron's saying, just planning out your show, knowing what questions you're going to be asking, but also keeping that, dynamic flow so that any stories, whether they're from you or from your guest, you can build off of that and create compelling content through it.
Bring on guest experts. What guests can you bring on to enhance the quality and exposure of your podcast? Well, I've been doing my show on Voice America. Voice America Media. I'm in my 24th year, and I have guests on all the time. And I find that for me, I will also state my opinion. It gives me an opportunity to have a conversation and share my opinion, but I'm really revolving around the guest and their topic and what I do. Some hosts just come on and they're really sharing their expertise, and they'll bring on a guest to supplement that. But my show is very, very topic oriented and content oriented, and I bring on the guest to discuss that content, and then I add my expertise to it. But I think it really does help. It adds another dynamic when it's just not one voice. Sandra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. That guest brings that authority, if you will, to your show, building the trust, showing that you're not just saying things to say it, but you've brought this expert on that is enhancing that conversation, sharing their expertise, making that show more relatable. I also like the fact that the guests can introduce you to their community. And that gives you exposure to a community that didn't know about you if it wasn't for the guests, but for the guests. So definitely enhancing that quality, definitely offering exposure to your community, your podcast, and vice versa. So I've always encouraged hosts to bring guests on for really that purpose, really to enhance the quality of the program and to expand their reach.
Yeah, and it's also great networking. I mean,
Yeah.
the people that you meet yourself, it's great networking. Aaron.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you want to look at guests that are in the same industry as you, that are touching on the same topics as you, that are in that same space. Don't bring your Aunt Arlene on. You'll want to look at experts that are in that same field that can actually drive your experience, drive your excuse me. Sandra started laughing. It threw me off.
No, because Bob, your neighbor. I mean, people have done that. I'm
Right.
bringing my Aunt Sue on for, it becomes that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Just stick with the people that will be able to direct their audience to your show, and you can grow from their audience. If they're on your show, they're talking about the same things. The people that are interested in their show are going to be interested in your show.
Yeah. Harrison.
Yeah, I mean, just networking is the biggest tool here, especially marketing wise. having someone else that has their own platform, their own show, kind of cross-pollinating your audiences together and seeing where the overlap is, and they'll probably gain some listens, you'll gain some listens, and kind of build up that community that you're already trying to build.
Okay. Now, this is interesting when to consider a co-host. First of all, you want to think about how will this co-host add to what I have? Will they complement my personality? Do they have a different take on the subject matter? Is our energy good together? What qualities would you look for? Again, can they complement your personality? How will they share the responsibility? And so it's kind of like it's a partnership, and it's a marriage in a way. I mean, when a co-host, you want a co-host that you really mesh with. They could have a very different personality and a different energy, but it's the meshing that really can work. And you have to think about this, and you may not want to have a co-host, but it can be terrific. I've worked with co-hosts and I've worked on my own for a lot of years, and there's advantages to both. Often I found the advantage of working with a co-host is they'll think of something I didn't think of, right? They'll add another dynamic to what that guest just said that I wouldn't have asked. So there's a lot of things that can really work with this, but again, you need to find that right individual, that right dynamic, that right energy. Sandra.
Yeah, that is so true. It's like putting a band together. You can have a solo artist, or you have a band that has, the drummer and the guitarist and the bass, and you want a fuller sound, you have those. But everybody has to be on that same page, and the co-host has to work equally. They need to work and be as invested in the research, the conversation that you want to have, bring the guest on, as you are. And I think that's more harmonious that way. If you do want to co-host, we work with a lot of shows, professionals that bring that do have a co-host on their show, and those shows work well, and some of them don't. So I think being realistic about this person and having that individual be as committed to the research, the booking of the guest, and doing all those elements and components of that program is you have to ensure that that's equally done. Otherwise, there's going to be some burnout and some animosity, and it just will not work eventually. So I think those are some things to consider.
Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me, what you said, Patricia, about it's like a marriage, and Sandra, you said it's like, putting together a band. Divorce rates are sky high and bands split up. I would say find someone that you can trust.
Yeah.
Find a co-host that you can trust to deliver good content with you, to be as invested as possible with you, and don't necessarily just look for someone that's going to say yes to everything you say. Find someone that has a different perspective that can offer value that you can't. That's what I would say.
Yep.
Great. Harrison, absolutely. Harrison.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to what Aaron said, it's perspective. If you're going in solo to a podcast, you're going to have a certain idea and questions you're going to ask, and maybe your co-host is going to have a different perspective on those questions, or ask different questions that maybe you wouldn't think of. So it adds a new dynamic, which sometimes, like we've been saying, doesn't work. Sometimes it works really well. So you just kind of have to be careful about who you're bringing in.
Right. Good. Well, we hope that this has been helpful, and we want to share some more things about what we're doing. My company, as I said, I've been on the network for a couple of decades now and more. I've interviewed over 6,000 people in my career, and I really have loved this work. And just to speak to all of this generally, for me, it has brought me tremendous friendships, networks. It's expanded the way that I think, because I brought on people who have different points of view, and it's really brought me a lot of energy. And I'm saying this, because I've been on several different broadcasts and networks, but I've stayed with Voice America Media for these years because I feel that they really grow with the times. I mean, when I first started, it was very different from where it is now. they're always looking at what, where is the market taking us? And it changes constantly. We went from radio then to internet, and now we're on podcasts. And they've grown with each step. And, they were one of the pioneers. So I can't say enough about Voice America Media and about the staff. And the people really care. I mean, this is a network that wants you to get information that's going to help you grow and help you learn and help you be more joyful in your life. And the hosts and the guests really speak to that. So I want to thank you all for this opportunity. And Aaron, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can talk more about Voice America Media.
Great. Well, thank you, Patricia. We really appreciate you being here and being here with us and the kind words. Viewers, we appreciate you joining us. I just want to give a quick summary of who we are, why we are the authority on these subjects, and why our expertise matters. Voice America Media. We've been around as Voice America since 1997. In 2025, we took a giant leap forward and became Voice America Media. We did that because the industry constantly evolves, and we stay at the forefront of it. Through technology, through processes, through trends, we are trying to be, right there at the front. But we are more than just a hosting platform. We are a place to host. We are a place to produce your show. We're a place to record it. We're a place to promote it, and we're a place to also design it. We help you build out the show from start to finish with full support of a client success team, engineers there to assist you with any audio issues. We've got Harrison here for marketing needs and graphic design needs. We've got promotional forms like press releases that we can promote for you. We also have blog posts and e-cards. E-cards are just promotional forms that we create through Canva, where you can go ahead and brand them around your brand. And then we have analytics, accessible IAB certified analytics for people to access through their show to see what strategies are working, what strategies aren't, and really gauge your performance as you do episode to episode. And we also have a full back end in partnership with Libsyn right now, where you can go and you can submit your show and you can add show notes, add different artwork for your show, and really just build your brand. Build your show around your brand. So we appreciate you guys being here with us and taking the time to learn everything that we have to say. We're looking forward to bringing you the other two parts, which are going to be marketing and production. We'll be bringing those in the coming months. If you'd like to connect with me, you can reach out to me, Aaron Keller, at aaron.keller, Kellar, at voiceamerica.com. I'd love to hear from you. And you can check us out at voiceamericamedia.com or sign up to join us at joinvoiceamerica.com. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a great week.